on an entirely different story.
Also, could I
But
use this platform when I was doing Black people shit? So
and we got to talk about that. We have to talk about that Black people shit because I was watching that too. I was like, you know what, this lady is a daggone hoop, but all about that social consciousness, which I absolutely love. So, but I'll tell you a little story after we talk about you. But
okay,
ladies and gentlemen, we're a little late. That's okay. That is the industry. That is the way things work. But you
yeah.
know what? Better late than never. This is the third time tonight that I had to put on this shirt. But that is okay because I am joined by an absolutely phenomenal actress, just a stellar person. This is my first time meeting her, but I am so excited because this is not my first time seeing her. I am joined on a conversation with Floyd Marshall Jr. with the incomparable Chrystee Pharris. And guys, just let me tell you a little bit about who this young lady is. Chrystee Pharris blazed on to NBC as Simone Russell on a hit time daytime soap opera Passions, which I used to watch back in the day. And
Okay.
she returned to NBC at night creating Passion with Golden Globe nominee Zach Braff on the hit show Scrubs, which I also watched. So she's concurrently be seen. And if you haven't watched this show, I highly recommend it. She can currently be seen on the All Black Network, Craig Ross's hit show Monogamy. If you have not seen this show, I highly, highly, highly recommend it. Now, she has also performed in the Journals of Osborne B. Anderson and Lady Patriot, both plays written and directed by Ted Lange. And she has received 2 Best Actress Awards and 3 Best Film Awards for her starring role in Steps of Faith, a faith based film currently on Pure Flix and Amazon Prime. But you know what? That is only scratching the surface because she also is a voiceover actress. She is a producer. She is a director. She's learning how to sword fight and all this other stuff. So and she sings.
Yeah.
So when we talk about and she teaches. So when we talk about multi-hyphenate, multifaceted, and all that other good stuff, this is the face that comes to mind. So, Chrystee, welcome to a conversation with. I am so happy that you are
Oh,
here.
thank you. I mean, what an honor. First, thank you for having me on your show, and what a great introduction. Sometimes you hear that stuff, and you're like, oh yeah, yeah. I mean, listen. At the end of the day, in this industry, you have to be multifaceted. You have to have multiple streams of income, and you also have to find things that bring you joy. And so all of those bring me joy. And when one gets a little place where I'm like, oh, it's on my nerves, then I start to tap into something else. And so that's why I have so many things under my belt.
Awesome. And actually, when I was talking with my web manager, she says, "Well, what are you going to title this show?" I said, "She does so much, I don't know." And then I said, "You know what? How to have multiple streams in Hollywood and look good doing it."
I
Because
take it.
so that is the title of this episode: how to have multiple streams in Hollywood and look good doing it. I said because she's got
Oh,
multiple streams and she looked good doing it.
I love it. I love it. Yeah, no, listen. I mean, I always knew that I wanted to be an actor. I mean, since I was 4, there was no other options. There was no plan B. There was no telling me that I couldn't do it. I think just being so naive of thinking that everybody who went after their goal made it, um, that was just, I just knew what I wanted and I went after it. And then when the industry started to shift in certain ways, and a friend of mine named Davika Parikh, she's actually on a show.
Yes,
Yeah, she's on a new show that's on OWN.
I can't remember the name of it, but I
Right.
know Davika. We
Yeah.
did a film together years ago.
Oh my God. Yeah. So Davika and I, she's one of my dearest friends. But we met at church, and she ended up introducing me to the voiceover world. And I started doing that about 15, 16 years ago. And then recently I started directing over the last couple of years. So
Okay.
Yeah, you just you gotta keep the hustle on, you gotta keep it fresh. And sometimes doing something different and the challenge of it makes you still excited about being in this industry.
You're absolutely right, but that's crazy. So we probably know a lot of the same people. So if you know Davika, then you definitely know Reggie.
Oh
Reggie
yeah,
Gaskins.
of course, of
We went
course.
we grew up together. We went to high school together.
Oh, okay. So yeah, see, we all went to the same church, so that was the whole
Yes.
crew.
That is it's a small world. So ladies and gentlemen, the lesson here is don't talk about people because you never know who knows somebody.
Oh, let me tell you a story. Let me tell you this story once. So I there was this girl, this is where I learned my lesson. There was this girl that had this clothing and like it was it was like some stuff going on that I was like, I was really young. We're talking about the early or the late 90s. And I was like, oh my God. I was like the virgin and was like, oh my God, the whole sex thing. And you know, but something happened where I was like, "Ooh, does she like men and women?" Like that was like a big deal back then. Now it's not a big deal and you respect everybody. But I was like, oh my God, is this person hitting on me? And I'm telling it to some random girl in Detroit who should not even know who this person was. And she ended up going such and such. And I was like, and I was like, yeah, I'll never talk about anybody again because I was straight telling somebody's business that I don't even know was even true or not. It was
Right.
just, I couldn't tell if the person was flirting with me or not. And I was like, oh my God, like what's happening? And I remember like learning my lesson. First of all, don't talk about people like that because you never know who knows who. But also too, looking back, I remember thinking, wow, that was so not cool to be talking about somebody's sexuality and stuff like that. But again, because the person was hitting on me, I was like, oh my God, what is he doing? And you guys have to realize too, like you have to put it in context of like the time period. I literally was still a virgin. I was like 20, almost, I didn't have sex till I was like 27 when I got married. Like that's a whole nother, that's why I wrote a one woman show about it. And so nah, very interesting experience. But it was just this whole world that I just was not exposed to. And I just remember learn my lesson, don't be talking about people and let people be who they are.
Wow. So we're going to have to talk about um, not until the age of 27. We're going to get to that, but I want to go. Wow. I had a child and everything. I was married and all of that stuff. So
I know. It became a
wow.
story. It became like my whole entire story because, first I had a brother that was like, would have beat up every single person if
Mhm.
anybody ever tried to have sex with me. That's number one. Then I moved to a place where like all of the, you know, guys were like backwards. So I was like, what, do you guys have no goals in life? Like, what do you mean? Like, you're not going to college or, you don't have a job or you just, you know, so it was like all of that. And not the college thing per se, but it was just
Right.
like you have no goals, right? And then I went to a school that was predominantly gay, which was Emerson. So
Mhm.
I was like, okay, so then there's no guys there. And then when I moved to Hollywood and I booked Passions, then, that was a story that my publicist was using. And then I was like, well, now I can't have sex because, now it's my story because they're expecting this from me. But
Right.
also Steve Harvey, I remember him saying to me, don't be the fresh meat. Um, and that kept me from like, when all the guys were flirting with me, the Shamars or the Jamie Foxxes, and it was very little. Nobody ever really wanted to holler. Like, yeah, I was a cute girl, but everybody knew I was innocent, so none of them really
Mhm.
wanted to do anything with me. They were like, it's like being close to Jesus. Like, I'm not, I can't. Like, I literally had guys. I had a couple of guys that said that to me. So, but you're flattered when you see these guys, like you're like, oh my God, that's Shamar, that's Jamie. You know what I mean? Like you're flattered when those things are happening when you first moved to LA. And then after a while, you're like, oh, Steve was like, you're the fresh meat. You're not special. You're just a
Oh,
new
oh,
girl that they're trying to conquer. And once they
right.
conquer you, then they're gonna move on. And I was like, oh. And I'm sure that there's probably some truth to it, but
Wow.
none of them want to have, they didn't want to get with me. I was too innocent.
Right. But thanks, Steve. You're not, I mean, good grief. You
Yeah,
could have,
yeah. He said it, he said it in a very nice way that helped me
right.
to understand what was going on. And
Right.
I'm also paraphrasing what he said to me, the way that I took it. You know what I
Right.
mean?
But I can kind, as a father of two daughters, we're going to go a little off topic, but as a father of two daughters, both of my daughters are grown. I would have certain conversations with them, and their mother would always ask me, "Why are you talking to them like that?" And because I would use certain language, I'm a man, and I would say, because this is what they need to hear and understand, that most young men are going after the prize, and you ain't necessarily it. What occupies a certain part of your body is the prize, not the entire you. And then I would put it, sometimes I would be graphic, and she says, "Why are you talking to them like that?" I said, "Because I need them to understand." So when you say, Steve said something to you, I know where he's coming from, because as a man, you're like, well, you ain't that, because you would be another notch
Yep.
in the belt. So I totally get it. But let's go back. Let's go way back to the beginning, since we touched on LA. Why did you decide to move out to Los Angeles?
I mean, it was Hollywood. I mean, this is what I wanted when I was 4 years old. There was no other place. I mean, I could have did New York, but I love theater, but I wanted to be on TV, period. I loved watching different TV shows. And when I hit those first couple of sitcoms and got a chance to do all that work with, Moesha and Sister Sister and Steve Harvey and Keenan and Kel, I was in heaven. I did a program, Emerson College, where I went to school, had an LA program where you can come to LA for a semester. But I told the head of the department that I wasn't coming back, and you need to help me figure out how I can still graduate and stay in LA the whole year. And he's like, "Well, it's never been done." I'm like, don't really care. I'm not going back to Boston in that cold weather. It is a wrap. And I was just so happy when I moved to LA, and I just never wanted to be anywhere else. And weather becomes a big portion of it too. That's another reason why I couldn't do New York. But I knew being here was going to be special, and I just knew I was going to make it. And it wasn't because I thought I was the best thing since sliced bread. I mean, if you only knew how scared I was, and I had my friends up to 3 and 4 o'clock in the morning running lines with me before the audition, and how I couldn't memorize, and how I wanted to pee on myself, or how I had to eat a couple of hours before I had an audition because I would have to go to the bathroom. You know what I mean? So it was like the nerves were there, and I was always scared, but I knew my craft. And nobody could take that away from me. And I would just walk in and kill these auditions. And the relationships that I made with people when I was an intern, most of those shows that I booked, those 7 shows in 6 months, were from people that I had met when I was interning, and they gave me an opportunity. And then, and at first I remember thanking them, like, "Oh my God, thank you so much for hiring me." And they would all almost kind of not reprimand me, but like the Steve Harvey thing, they'd be like, "We didn't give you this role. You earned it.
Right.
You went in there and nailed that audition." And I don't think I really got that until maybe 10 years or so later. I never accepted that I was really that good. I didn't know how to take in that. I was like, "Oh, they must have really helped me." And it's like, no, it's because you're talented. You were confident when you walked in the room. And a lot of people tell me that.
Yeah, and it's interesting. When I was acting years ago, my acting teacher told me that one time. He said, you know what, Floyd, you're really good. And I'm like, oh, yeah, whatever. And he said, let me say something to you. He says, when someone tells you something like that, he said, take it in and be appreciative of it. And don't short sell it. He said, because a lot of people don't hear that. So when someone is saying that to you, take it the way they mean it. So, but you know what? I think because we're always taught to, you have to be humble and be a little self-deprecating. And when you're thanking people, you're coming from a place of sincerity, but you don't want to seem like you're being prideful or obnoxious or arrogant, like I know I'm the shit. And you can curse on this show.
I got a potty mouth.
Because I was watching the interview and you said shit. You was like, uh-oh. Then you was like, fudge, so you can, you can curse on this show. But I understand because you kind of have to grow into who you are.
Yeah, I didn't learn until maybe, I moved out to LA in 97. I didn't get that until 2012 when I started working with Ted Lange, who played Isaac from Love Boat, who is my mentor. And, I would do these performances with him, these plays. And I remember every show I would walk out and I just be like, oh, that sucked. And all these legends would come up and say, Marla Gibbs, Lou Gossett Jr., oh my God, the one that played Benson.
Robert Guillaume?
Yes.
Robert Guillaume.
Yeah, Robert Guillaume. All these people would come up to me and give me so much love and just be like, Richard Roundtree, all of them like, oh my God, that was amazing. And I'm just like, oh, God, it was such a bad performance tonight. And they're all looking at me like, like Judy Page and Beverly, oh my God, Beverly. Oh my God, it's going to come to me in a second. Oh my God. I remember Beverly just looking at me like, if you don't take in what I just said, like, what are you talking about? And when you have these legends who pave the way, you should allow them to give the praise. And Ted got mad at me once, actually. Mm-hmm. He stopped me from doing that. And what I learned from that and what I received from that is that it doesn't matter what you think and what you feel. It's what did the audience feel? And if those people are coming to give you praise, then you're doing something right. Because trust and believe, they're critical and they won't say shit to you. But if they're coming up to you and giving you love, they're also seeing themselves in you. They paved the way. So you should accept their praise. And so now I just receive when people give me love, even like some of the movies that I've done that I thought were horrible. When people give me love, I just accept it. I don't like, oh my God, it was so awful. I can't believe you liked it. Or, oh, I was awful. Oh, it's like you're basically telling them that their opinion is shitty. Like they don't know what they're talking about or something. And you shouldn't do that. But it took me a long time to get to that place. And that's why I share these stories, because if there's an actor who's watching, yes, I work all the time. I'm very blessed in that area. But I don't want you to think that I'm always 100% confident. Let me take that back. That I'm 100% like I don't have nerves. I'm always confident because I do the work. But the days that I don't do the work is when I start to retreat. But I also had to learn how not to put myself down as much. And I don't know if that's an actor thing or if it's a cultural thing. But I finally grew up and learned to accept myself for who I am and know that I'm great at what I do. And I know my craft, and can nobody take that away from me.
You know what, you just said something. I think it's all of those things, but I think the most important thing that you just said is you grew up and you accepted yourself. Mm-hmm. I think when we get to that point, that's when we really come into our own, into ourselves, because it took me years to be comfortable in this.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Because you would hear so many things about, being dark and things like that. But when I finally got to a point in accepting me and knowing that I'm okay as I am,
Yeah.
and if you ain't cool with it, you.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Then all bets are off. So when you finally got to that point, you were like, you know what? I'm deserving of those accolades. I'm deserving of them saying, you know what, Chrystee, you tore that shit up.
Right. Right.
But I get it, because when you have people like that, you're like, wow, really? What did you see? And it's so funny that years ago, when I worked for Macy's, and someone came in and wanted to buy a briefcase, and they said, well, I like it. What do you think of it? I said, well, I think it's ugly. And my manager pulled me to the side and said, you should have never said that to them. Because here's the thing. It's not about what I think.
Yeah.
So when someone is saying, I loved you in that film, and you're like, you love me in that shit, it's not about what you think, because you're a performer and you're performing for those people. So if they, like you said, if they got enjoyment out of it, then that should be the main thing. But let's talk about these 7 shows that you booked when you first moved to Los Angeles, because somebody's going to be listening to this talk about, seriously, so she just come to LA and she just booked 7 network shows. How in the world did that happen?
It was the connections that I made when I was an intern. I worked on a show called Vibe, which was on the CBS lot. Steve Harvey was across the way, and Vibe was the hit show that every Black celebrity would go into the green room. And I worked in the green room with the performers, like making sure they had their coffee and their tea. And I had no problems doing that, running around for them. But every celebrity that came in there would always drop some wisdom, or I would, say something funny or talk to them or get wisdom. And all of those people, when I graduated, they opened the door for me. They were like, hey, come in and audition. Now, I can't guarantee you a job, but come in and audition. And they would take my picture and resume in there, like Steve Harvey did. So did Rashawn McDonald, who was a producer on Sister Sister. All these people, like William Allen Young, who played Moesha's dad. Was like, I could tell you a good person. Go in there and give them my name and tell them that I referred you. And so all of these people just looked out for me, maybe because they just love my spirit. And I went in there and proved that I deserved to be there, even though I had nothing on my resume. I literally had nothing on my resume. The only thing I had was a kick-ass picture, a headshot, because headshots mean everything. If your headshots don't say something, if they don't say I'm a film actor, a TV actor, a commercial actor, you're never going to get in the door. If your picture looks like you're green, you're never going to get in the door. You got to make sure that your pictures they're probably the most important thing, because if your picture looks like they could play the character, it doesn't matter what's on the back of the resume. And like I said, I had nothing on my resume, but I would get, guest star billing on all of these shows, and I would go in there and kill it, So that's kind of how I got started. It was about the connection. And I think the reason why my agent really loved me and why they worked so hard for me was because of those 7 shows, 5 of those shows I got on my own. So that means that they worked hard for me, because I could leave them at any time because I was getting my own stuff. But we also worked as a team, because if I dropped off my picture and headshot, at a casting director's office, I would call my agent and be like, listen, I just dropped this off. My friend's a PA on the show. He read the script. They're looking for somebody who looks like me. So I need you to call and pitch. And I just dropped off my picture and resume. And then they would call, or vice versa. And they would, next, the casting director's calling me in, and then I'm booking the show. So it's just all the right timing. It's the confidence. It's the boldness. It's being naive of like doing stuff like that. You know, you just have to do it, because if you don't, you will sit in the cut and wonder why you're not working, and then be bitter that everybody else is working who can't act at all, but they just understand the business of acting.
So before we get to that, you said something that really jumped out about you and your agent and the working relationship that you have.
Yeah.
You said you guys are a team. And sometimes when I would do rooms in Clubhouse, we would have actors and actresses come to the stage and be like, well, my agent's not allowing me to. And the fact that you said it's a team.
Yeah.
And that's one thing that we would stress. So going into the business of acting, because I teach that as well, can you talk about that? The symbiotic relationship between an actor and their agent, and actually the business side of this business, because so many actors and filmmakers, their main thing is I want to create, which is fine. But what about the business? There's a reason the word business is bigger than the word show. So can you talk about that? Because I understand that you teach that.
Yeah, my teaching is on the marketing side of things. But when I say, you know, you work with a team, as soon as my agent says, I mean, as soon as my agent tells me I can't do something, I'm firing them straight up. Like, wait, I can't do what? I'm fired. Because we don't work together. We're not working together. We're not on the same page, and I'm not going to stifle what God is telling me to do. Now, there's a difference when you're doing some obnoxious thing. Like, you got to find reason. There's some actors that do some outrageous stuff, and like, it's annoying, and you're going to blacklist yourself, right? I'm not talking about that. But if an agent is like, I remember one time an agent told me there was an audition and that I wanted to have, that I wanted to get on. So I self-taped myself and I sent it to my agent. I would have sent it directly to the casting director, but I was like, well, they're a new agent. Let me send this to them. So I sent it to them to ask if they would send it to the casting director. And they were like, oh my God, no, blah, 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 blah. And we got into this big, huge argument. So I was like, you know what? This is not a good fit. You're in the old school, I'm in the new school, and this is how I've gotten stuff in the past, and so it's not going to be a good fit. Well, sure enough, they ended up sending it to them or something, and I ended up getting the audition. So, but that was after I had left them, and so we had to, you know, it became like this whole big huge ordeal. But that's the first thing. The business side of things is there's a lot of talented people, but they don't understand the business. They don't understand how to market themselves. They don't understand how to stay relevant in this business. And if you don't understand that, you're just going to be frustrated and bitter, and you're going to be wondering why you're not auditioning and why you're not getting roles, or why you had a great audition and you didn't get it. And it's important to really understand that. I mean, I've been doing this for 25 years and I stay relevant, and I constantly, consistently work, whether I'm doing on-camera stuff or voiceover stuff, or directing or producing. I'm always constantly working. So when one thing's not fitting right now, because it's the time has changed and you're no longer the it person, then you got to start doing something else. Because right now, you know, it's Black people are popular, and then it becomes Asian, and then it becomes, you know, Hispanic, and then it becomes young people, and then it becomes older people. And if you're in an age range or a minority that's not the it, you might not work for a while, and it's nothing personal. So you got to figure out something else that you can do to make it work. And most of the students that I work with, because I don't let people stay with me longer than like 2 to 3 months, because I don't want anybody to be dependent, and I don't want people to spend that much money on me. I used to do it for free, or I used to do it at colleges. But I realized that there's no reward in either one. And I realized that when you don't charge people, people don't really do the work. And colleges became a little boring because I couldn't do the follow-up with people. But doing it one-on-one, everybody has booked their first speaking role on TV or booked their agent within the first 4 to 6 months. Most of them booked around the 4th month, the people who really did the work. But once you get that niche, the tools, you don't need me anymore. I'm not here to babysit you. I'm not here to I make great money, so I don't need it. And I'm not charging you enough to keep you under, in my Rolodex and stuff. It's just enough to give you the tools. Once you get the tools and understand, you have to learn how to trust your gut, because everybody's going to always have an answer for you and tell you what to do. It doesn't mean that it's the right one for you. That answer does not mean it's the right one for you. So, you have to trust your instinct, and you have to understand the business side. Otherwise, you're not going to make it.
So let's talk about that for a second, because I was listening to an interview you had done, and you talked about the fact that when you initially went to LA and you booked those 7 shows, it was because you were trusting you.
Yes.
But then you got into the classes with the technique and the this and the that, and it kind of took you off your square because you were learning how to technically do it the proper way.
Yes.
And that's fine, because we all need the structure. But you were saying that it kind of got in the way of your natural instincts, that the things that got you those shows, you were kind of suppressing because they said, well, you're not supposed to do it that way. You're supposed to stand this way, and you're supposed to speak this way. And you're supposed to emote this. So talk about that.
Yeah. I mean, I took this class called Leslie Kahn. She's very popular. Her techniques, I definitely understand the techniques and stuff that she's doing. And for people who don't have a natural ability, it's great for them, especially for comedy. She's really popular. But we bumped heads because what was making me upset was that I started in this class, and you start with a whole bunch of people who are seasoned and not seasoned. And what was happening was, she tells you that you should rehearse every day, which I believe that there's truth, and you should work with everybody in the class, and you always get the same material. By the time we would get to the end of the week, if I worked with 2 or 3 people, by the time we got to the end of the week and we got ready to do class, everybody had stole everything that I was doing, and the whole class was doing exactly what I was doing, what I was doing in rehearsals. And so I was like, so mind you, I'm quick on my feet, because that's what a comedian or a comedy actor has to do. You have to learn how to stay on your feet and create new things. So while I'm watching everybody do my stuff that I created, I'm sitting up here trying to figure out, how am I going to change this up and still get the laugh and still get what I need? So they would all laugh at the end, and then the teacher would go, wow. Leslie would go, wow. So why did you do it that way? And then I told her, I said, because everybody was stealing my shit. I didn't want to come in here and do the exact same thing that everybody else is doing. Oh, well. And then we bumped heads because she told, they have to do something called the log line. And the log line is, if people ask you what's your log line, you tell them it's blah, blah, blah. And she was like, so one girl came up with Nell Carter, the funny of Nell Carter with the Halle Berry face or something. And I was kind of offended by that. Because I was like, well, she's big and broad and a little bit different. And she was like, oh my God, that's so perfect. It's not. And we got in a big argument about race. And then she was like, well, I am so sick and tired of every Black person thinking that I have to stand up for them and fight this fight and blah, blah, blah. And she wrote me this long letter, and I wrote her a letter back. And that was the end of that relationship. I don't know why I went through that whole story, because we talked about, the whole point is that I started using those techniques, and then I stopped using my natural ability of funniness, and then I couldn't get it back. And it took me a minute to get back to that natural ability that was booking me all those shows. I would rehearse with my friends, and that's how I booked all of those shows. And then I go to this school, and now I'm all in my head trying to do stuff. You know what I mean? So, yeah, I mean, I booked all those shows, Passions, Scrubs, all of that before I started going to class. And when I started going to class, and I stopped working.
Well, you know what's interesting about that story? It's a cautionary tale for anyone listening or who will be listening, because sometimes you're so scared that you won't book or you won't make the right connections that you put yourself in a closet and you start wanting to do things to please other people. And when you have someone like Miss Khan, who I guess is pretty big out there, if she's saying something to you, then you're like, okay, well, I guess she's right, because she's Leslie Khan. And you have you in the background screaming, don't do that, don't do that, don't do that. So I get it. And you know, for someone who's not as well grounded as you were, and you said it took you a while to get back to that, because she kind of got in your head a little bit. So it happens to all of us. But you mentioned, I'm sorry, please.
But I just want to add, also too, you have to be careful, especially if you're a person of color. Your comedy and your timing and stuff like that could possibly be a tad bit different. And so sometimes people who don't understand your culture can try to take that away from you, because it doesn't fit in the mold of what, you know, this thing, right? And so I think I've had some coaches try to do that. Or, oh, can you be a little more ghetto with it? You know what I mean? Like, you know, like you should put a little stank on it. And I'm like, I'm sorry, but this isn't that type of show. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you have to be so in tune of like, when can you bring your blackness out and when you can't. You know what I mean? But it's always so funny when you go into an audition, they're like, can you give me less San Francisco and a little more Oakland? You know, because they try not to say, you know, being ghetto. Can you be a little more ghetto? You know, and there's been a couple of times, oh, you want the stereotypical Black girl thing. Okay. So I know I'm going to lose it, because I actually said that in an audition, like, oh yeah, so you want the stereotypical Black girl thing. I'm sorry, that's not who I am. I'm not that girl. You know what I mean? Like, I could definitely bring some stank to some stuff, you know what I mean? But I am not, you know, a stereotypical Black crazy. Well, that's not true. I am. And back then I was a little more innocent. You know what I mean? That was the virgin days when I was a virgin. So I definitely had no experience in some stuff. And so I was like, yeah, I can't do all that. Like, that's not who I am.
But you know what though? Here's, because it's happened to me in auditions where they say, well, can you be more Black? I'm like, Black, play, don't get no blacker than this. I'm a dark-skinned Black man, so it doesn't get any blacker than what you see in front of you. So when they would say, well, can you do more? I don't know. I'm sitting here listening to a white casting director asking me, can I be more Black? And I'm like, you ain't never been Black a day in your goddamn life. So how can you sit up there and ask me to be more Black when you don't even know what being
Black is? You know what's so interesting, that I'm thinking about it? I think now that I'm thinking about it, I wonder if we still would have been offended if they would have said, hey, can you be this is a guy who didn't go to college, grew up in the hood. Like, if they had said that, maybe we would have been less offended. I wonder. Like, if they would have given a description of the character. But I mean, even sometimes when they go, a beautiful African American. So are you telling me that there are some women that are Black that are not beautiful? Like, I mean, like some of the shit is just offensive. You know
It
what I mean?
is.
I think they're getting a little bit better because this was like in the 90s, early
Mhm.
2000s. So I'm assuming that people have finally checked some folks. But
Yeah.
I used to just be sitting there going, but you played the game. Like I played the game. I was just like, oh, okay. And I would, yo, yo, yo.
Did you get the part after you did that?
No, because it wasn't authentic.
And see, that's the thing. That's the thing. You want me to do something and be something I'm not. But to your point, if
Isn't that what acting is? So how
right,
can I be mad at them for asking me to do that? Because that's what acting is. You want me to be something that I'm not.
right.
So how can we really get mad at them asking for that particular, thing?
I think you know what, to your point, I think it's how you asked me and the words that you use to ask me. Because when you say, can you be more Black, that's monolithic. That's like that encompasses every Black person that's walking
Okay,
around.
so
And
that right there just lets you know. As soon as you use that word monolithic, I'm just like, oh, see, yeah, look at that. He using big words.
I'm sorry.
I gotta look that word up. You know what I'm saying?
Let me
So
Google it
no,
really quickly.
you are not the stereotypical Black person that white people expect us to be. You just use the word monolithic. I don't even know if I'm saying the word right.
You're saying it correctly.
Let
But
me
it's
look that up. Hey Siri, what does monolithic mean? Don't talk, Siri. Don't talk.
but it's the truth though. But like you said, if you had approached it that way, he grew up in this particular area. He only had a 10th grade education. He had to drop out of school.
Right.
You can kind of visualize what that person would be like and what that person would sound like.
Yeah, because you would change your whole body would change.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's not just, okay, let me say it differently. It's like, oh shoot, let me be a little more like this.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, yo, what's up? You're
Right.
gonna be your whole body, energy, everything would change. But that's not what they say. Could you be a little more Black? And then you're
Right.
already in your head because you like this mofo.
Mhm. Because the experience of someone who maybe didn't graduate high school and had to go out there and make it on their own, their life experience is entirely different from someone two-parent household. They went to college, they got a degree, they live in the suburbs with a picket fence, but we're
Yeah,
both Black, but our experiences are not the same. So the
exactly.
fact that when you say, well, can you be more Black? I don't understand what you're saying to me. I've been Black all my life.
Exactly. Exactly.
But I want to talk about passions
Hmm.
because there's this scene going around. You ain't no real sister.
I know. You're cutting off the top of your head and almost your eyes a little bit.
There we go. Yeah, there
Oh,
we go. All right. I was wondering why is my new technology, ladies and gentlemen. Um, but I saw that scene, and here's the interesting thing about that scene. First of all, it was a phenomenal scene, but the young lady that you slapped,
mhm.
my wife and I watched General Hospital. And I'm looking and I'm saying to myself, why does she look so familiar? Because now she's on General Hospital. And I said to my wife, I said, the young lady that I'm about to interview, I said, look at this clip. And she said, oh my gosh, that's such and such. I said, so now she on here stealing somebody, man.
Oh, Brooker, I am so mad at you. Yeah, Brookie. Yeah, she's amazing. I never forget when I auditioned for the show and I had the test, and she and Lindsay, um, who played Teresa on the show, they both saw me when I was leaving, and they basically stopped me and was like, that was amazing. And when you have two young people give props to another young person, it just meant the world to me. So needless to say, when we were on the show, the bond was there. And that particular scene, I remember having to do the slap, and as soon as they would say cut, we both at the same time like, "Are you okay?" It was like both of us just had a concern, and it was so funny to like both of us be concerned about it. But that was a hard day. It was a lot of crying. It was a lot of just going through the emotions. But I mean, I still remember the lines like, "A sister would never do this to another sister. You're nothing but a whore, a low life whore." And Passions, I remember that particular week the ratings were up. I mean, when everybody's like, I remember an article that was saying that Passion stayed the same while all of the other soap operas had went down. So it was highly watched. That whole thing for that week of me leading up to finding my sister sleeping with my man Chad.
That was hilarious. But you know what was great about that show? And I watched an interview you did a few years ago, and they talked about the fact that the cast, you had a lot of us in that cast.
Yes. Amazing.
And for someone who's watched soaps for years, that was not something that you saw
Right.
very often. You would see, a little here, a little there, a friend, but to see that many people of color in one place and in prominent roles
Yeah.
was very different. So you guys were doing some groundbreaking work.
Yeah, I mean, I remember the first time I'd seen that many. A few was Y&R, Young on the Restless, which is why I ended up doing my internship there when I was in college. But to be on a show that had, let's see, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, like 8, 9, Black actors, not including the Latino actors, and even though my character unfortunately was not a main character, I took over somebody's role, so I had to get in where I fit in, right? But to see, the Brooke Kerr, who played Whitney, the one that I slapped, and the one that played my mom, to see them have dominant roles on the show and not just, "Oh, we're just going to have a little storyline and then we're going to fade them out." Like, no, they worked every single week like the rest of the other actors. And that to me was something else, something special that I had never seen and experienced. And, it was lovely. Like, I couldn't be mad at it. Of course, I was a little saddened that my character was not as big, but the other side of it was like, this is amazing to see these women dominating the show.
So with that, because you were talking about the fact that your work kind of slowed down.
Mm-hmm.
So did they ever give you a reason as to why that was happening, or were they just
from what I had heard from the other older actors who had seen actors come in and out, what they tend to do was, I mean, there was a lot of factors. One of the factors was my contract was going to be up for renewal, and they tend to pull back and not work you as much so that you can be like, "Oh my God, I need to work." And then you'll sign a new contract. That is what one of the other actors had said to me that they've seen in the past. The other thing, though, was that 911 had happened. Reality shows started to come into play. They were cheaper and they started to take over daytime soaps. And daytime soaps started to get the boot. So they had to start cutting and slashing the money because the industry kind of had shut down a little, you know what I mean, with 911 and all that stuff happening. And then a strike and all that kind of stuff happened. When the strike happened, that's when the reality shows and all that kind of stuff. So it was a combination of like a whole bunch of stuff that probably played a part, but I also think it could have been because of the renewal. I decided not to renew my contract because I like to work and I felt like I was being underused. Um, and yeah, it would have been great to stay, but I would have been frustrated because that last year I was on the show, I didn't work at all. And I was frustrated. And I remember everybody calling me and telling me that the casting director who did Will and Jada's show, All of Us, really wanted me to come in because they wanted me to play Jada. And so they always said that I reminded them of Jada. And I couldn't audition because I was doing Passions, but Passions didn't work me the whole entire year.
Wow.
Literally did not work me the whole entire year. I think I went from doing like 200 episodes the first year to barely doing 40.
Wow.
And so, and this was literally right after I had that big, huge reveal of me slapping Whitney and all that kind of stuff. I just knew that everything was going to start picking up because everybody was like, oh my God, it was amazing. Nope. They literally put me on lockdown and I did not work for the rest of that year.
Wow.
And so I was frustrated. I was sad. I was depressed. And I was like, if they have that much say over my life and I have another show that wants me, you know what I mean? And meaning they wanted me to at least come in and audition and I couldn't. I was like, I gotta go. And one of the directors said to me, he was like, you're too good for this show. And that really kind of helped me to leave. And then I left and I booked, Scrubs, and so that was a huge ordeal. Every Black woman in Hollywood wanted that role. And they actually wanted to give it to somebody else. But, which I found out, a friend told me. And so because she told me that, and I knew what her weaknesses was, I got my friends together who were comedians and we all worked on that audition material. And I went in there and killed that audition. And I did these little manifestation stick figures where I was like, I want Zach Braff and the casting director and the producer to all laugh and say how funny I was. And when I walked in the door before I had the audition, I remember when I walked in the door, when I had my final audition, I remember Bill Lawrence saying, just so you know, I'm probably not going to laugh because the material is not funny. I hate it. I can't wait to get rid of it. So don't take it personal. And when I did my audition, he actually laughed. And then he said, wow, you are really funny. And then before I got to my car, I got the phone call saying that I had booked the role and that it was mine.
Isn't that a great feeling?
It was amazing, especially because I knew that I wasn't their first choice per se. Now, how, do I know for sure? Maybe Bill Lawrence would be like, what are you talking about? But I knew that they wanted somebody else, according to a friend of mine who told me. But I remember just being so nervous, but I knew my craft. I knew my words. I knew what I was going to do. I knew, where I should make it funny. And shout out to all my friends that came over to help me,
That's beautiful. So the one thing that's a through line in talking with you is knowing your craft.
Yes.
Is knowing your craft and just the importance of, because when you know it, you know it. And we're all nervous when we go into the room, but when you know what you know, it helps a hell of a lot.
Yeah. When you can ground yourself when you go into the room, which is why you have to be 120% over prepared. Because when you walk in the room, there's so many things that could throw you off. Sometimes the casting directors will purposely throw it off. because they want somebody else. I've had casting directors do that. I've had casting directors start talking in the middle of my auditions. I've had casting directors take phone calls. So you really have to be 100. I've had some that just never paid attention. Like they were not paying attention to me. I could tell they were not interested. And then I because I knew my stuff so well and I knew how to manipulate the situation, I would do things to make them look up and go, you know, because they'll be writing, they'll just be doing some other stuff and they'll go, wow, you are really good. You know what I mean? Like, and so I set goals when I have auditions. Like when I see people do that, my challenge is forget the role. They're not even interested in me anyway. So what am I going to do? I'm going to get in there and make them so intrigued that they're going to have to look up and look. You know what I mean? Like I've done that. I've had auditions where I knew that they were going to cast somebody else. You know what I mean? Not just the Scrubs thing, but I've had a couple of other ones where they were like, look, they're going to cast such and such and such, but I want them to meet you. I want Debbie Allen to meet you. I want such and such to meet you. And then I would go in there and then I would end up booking the role and they would give that other person something else in another episode. So, yeah, it's just one of those things that you just have to go in there and know your craft. Period. At the end of the day.
Yeah, and that is
I'm sorry, and not allow them to throw you off, because I've had a few situations. Sometimes you might walk in the room and you're like, oh shit, Brad Pitt is in here. You know what I mean? Like you're just like, oh, how do I handle this? Like you could get, I've had a couple auditions where people were in the, like, you know, I've 2 or 3 auditions and then all of a sudden I walk in the room on the 3rd audition and a celebrity is in there and will completely throw me off. And I'd be like, fudge. And they know my work. That's what makes it even worse. Or it's a friend. And I would get in my head because it's a friend. Oh my God, I don't want them to see if and then I just completely drop it. That's why you got to know your craft. And sometimes you might know your craft and you still gonna fuck the shit up. So.
And it happens. But we have talked, and there is so much that I still didn't get to, and we are almost at an hour. But we're going to go a little bit over if that's okay with you, because I have a question about, first of all, before we get to your short film, I saw your reel, and I must say that, and I watched the reel again based on listening to an interview that you had done. And that is the first time I've ever seen anyone do a reel like that.
Oh, yeah. I'm an innovator. I'm always doing things that are unique and different and crazy. And when agents and managers will tell me you shouldn't do it that way, I do it anyway. And then they're like, oh, my God, such and such loved your reel, or such and such loved this, or such and such loved that. I remember when my agent told me that having a website was like stupid. And I booked so many jobs off of that website. You know what I mean? Don't do your picture in color. Now everybody's doing it in color. Don't turn your picture to the side and it should be up and down instead of like this. And I was, you know, and so I just always do things a little bit different. Not necessarily because I want to do something different, because that doesn't always work, but I trust my instinct and I trust my gut. And people look at that and they're like, I actually watched the whole entire thing, because I usually cut it off in the neck, you know, in the first 50 seconds. But I watched the entire thing. It was brilliant. So I'm always doing things differently.
That was, I was watching that and I'm like, oh my goodness. And you know what? That makes you stand out because everyone else is doing it the way everyone else is doing it. But when you were basically, it was kind of like a news show with some salaciousness. And then when you did the scene, you're like, well, can we rewind that? That was fun. Let's do that again. Yeah. See, that's so different. Now, if I'm a casting director, I'm going to stop. I'm going to watch it again. But then more importantly, I'm sending it to someone else which is what you want. Like,
Yeah,
yo,
true.
I just saw this lady, Chrystee Pharris. Yo, you got to check this out.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then that's how, well, you know what? We need to bring her in because you were offering such a range of different things in only a few minutes,
Yeah.
which was brilliant.
Yeah. It was just something that, a friend of mine, I don't want to say it, another teacher, a hosting thing, and she's a hosting teacher. And she and I started talking. I was like, I should do this for my acting. And that's when I decided to do something like that. Yeah. You just got to be different. You got to make yourself stand out.
Yeah, that was a nice piece. But something else that you did that I watched, and I really want to know where you came up with the concept. Black people shit. Where did
Yeah.
that come from?
A friend of mine, Abdul Majid, and I were having a conversation, and we were like, we should talk about, what's trending in Black media and the injustice of things.
Yes.
And so we started doing them as these 1 minute pieces and, 2 or 3 minute pieces, and they became extremely popular. And I did like over 50 episodes of those. And then the pandemic happened. And so we were like, well, we should turn it into like a little talk show. And the week that we turned it into a talk show was the week that George Floyd died. So we had already set up like, hey, advertising, and then George Floyd died. And it was like, wow, okay. So we thought we were going to be talking about this stuff, but now we need to talk about this. And then everybody was like, oh my God. And, like everybody was telling us how they felt. And it was a place of freedom to be able to talk about it, to vent. And then it just became the show where we kept talking about all the things that were happening, because it just seemed like every single week somebody was getting killed, or somebody was doing this, or some police officer was doing this. And then we would always end with something positive so that people had something to walk away with, some type of joy. And we would bring people on the show to talk about, their products or what they did in the community or something to that effect. So yeah, that was just something that we all kind of did. And my, one of my great friends, Janora McDuffie, came on board, and, the rest is history with that.
So do you plan on bringing it back, because it's phenomenal?
Yeah, I'm not sure. It started to get so heavy, so I kind of want to do a different type of show. It's more of a social conscious type thing that I'm creating at the moment.
Oh, okay. So now let's talk about your one woman show, because I was listening to the interview and you were talking about how this one woman show came about. So can you talk about that?
Yeah. I was going through a divorce, and I was like, oh my God, what am I going to do with my life? And the strike was happening, and, it was like all this crazy stuff. And so I sat down and started writing this piece called In Search of O, and it's about waiting until marriage at 27 to have sex, and the fantasy versus the reality of that experience. And it's a funny piece. And I remember doing it for the first time, and people would not stop laughing. And they cried at places. And I was like, oh my God, they love it. But it's a very therapeutic thing to watch. I think a lot of women and men have gone through something like this. And it's really about learning how to have a connection, because I think sometimes we don't connect with people. And, so I had no idea, that much of a hit that I was going to get. It's like getting a standing ovation every single time.
So 27. Why did you decide to wait, if you don't mind my asking?
It became, my brother was a football player, the star football player, a bully, and you just was not going to mess with his little sister. That was the first thing. And then I moved to an area in the world where, all the guys were, gay when I went to college. And so that knocked out that experience. So from high school to college, I was like, man, there's nobody here. They're all gay. Wow. And so then I moved to Hollywood, and Steve Harvey was like, yeah, don't be the fresh new meat. You're not special. Like, these guys are just looking at you because you're the new girl. And once they conquer what they conquer, you're not going to be important anymore. So then I was like, well, I ain't going to get caught up in that. They ain't gonna me. So then that became the story. And then when I booked Passions, then the publicist was using the fact that I was still a virgin. And then it was like, well, now this is my story. I really can't do nothing.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like everybody's waiting for this, the situation. Like, when are you gonna get married? Became my story. And then the story didn't come out as great as I thought. Hence the one woman show In Search of O. So and there's the story.
Okay. That's interesting. So would you do it again? Would you get married again?
Oh yeah. Listen, my marriage wasn't bad for it. In those reasons. I mean, he's still a friend. Like, I still talk to him probably once a month or so. Still friends with his mother and brother and all that. He checks on my mom. I check on his mom. You know what I mean? Like, he's still a friend. We just weren't meant to be together.
And it happens. It happens.
Yeah.
Sometimes you're better friends than husband and wife.
Exactly.
It happens. But I want to talk about that television show that you're on. Because that thing, because I interviewed Karen, I think about 6 months ago. Mm-hmm. And I started watching the show. I have one more season to watch, mm-hmm. which is the last season. Mm-hmm. That show was crazy. But I want to talk about really quickly, because we're going to wrap this up pretty soon, because I don't want to keep you all night. Mm-hmm. Darius and yourself.
Yes.
And the interplay between the two of you, and the back and forth, and you being the rich wife, and him being some people probably haven't seen it, so I'm not going to give too much away, because what I'd like for you to do is to go on to All Black, subscribe, and watch the monogamy. But I'm going to let you talk about how in the world did they come up with such an amazing concept, because it is entirely different from what you see the typical Black show, because how did they come up with such a phenomenal concept?
I mean, listen, Karen and Craig, who are married, they're brilliant. They said that they were sitting in bed one day talking about, well, you don't do this and I don't do, well, you need a man like this. Well, you need a woman like this. And they ended up writing this whole entire piece, pulled the team together, and they made it happen. I mean, it's phenomenal. If you guys don't know anything about it, it's about 4 couples who are going through marital issues and decide to do a spousal swap. And then they try to do a spousal swap to see if they can work out their own marriage with this new person. And it gets intense. I mean, I watch the show as a fan, as opposed to watching myself as an actor. I get caught up in the whole entire story. And this last season was freaking phenomenal. The work that I did on it made me just go, like, I didn't even know I could even take it to that level. Wow. I really didn't. It's probably one of the best works that I've done. And so, yeah, they're just incredible. And I was honored that they called me out of the blue and said, hey, do you want to do this part? And I was like, yeah. And he was like, well, shouldn't you read the script first? I was like, oh yeah, but yeah, I want to do anything that you're doing, Craig. Of course I want to be part of it, so, and they gave me an incredible role. So I'm very, I'm honored.
And you had some great leading men that you were on screen with. Oh goodness gracious, his name is the gentleman that you ended up.
Brian.
Yes, that the dynamic. You know what? This show was so good. And I'm not just saying that because I'm interviewing you and I've interviewed Karen, but this show was really, really good. And it really threw me for a loop when you started to see certain things
Yeah.
because it started out relationship wise and then it went left.
Hmm.
And oh, goodness gracious. And then it kind of went, what the heck? It went to a kind of like a science fiction.
Hmm.
And when I saw that, I just stood up and cheered because I'm a big science fiction fan.
Oh,
So,
wow.
so the fact that it took that turn, again, it's not something that you really see when you're talking about Black shows. So when you guys were in the reading rooms, I mean, did you guys discuss that? The fact that it just wasn't the typical show that you would normally
You
see?
know what? We shot that during COVID, so we don't usually get together
Oh boy.
and talk about that stuff ahead of time. So no, we did not. It was a little weird for me. I was like, huh? But then when you see it all put together, again, you have to trust your director. When you see it all put together, you're like, oh, this makes sense. You know what I mean? So yeah, it was interesting.
Okay. So it's good. So I definitely have to watch the last season. Last thing, your award-winning short film.
Yeah.
Where
Well,
can I find it? Because I saw it on, or was it still doing the film festival circuit? Because I saw the trailer on YouTube, but I was unable to find the actual film.
yeah, it because it's doing the short film circuit,
Okay.
we can't put it online just yet. We keep thinking that it's coming to an end. And then somebody's like, oh, we want to put it in. We want to put it in. So it keeps making its round. I mean, it's been over a year. We weren't expecting it to go on this long.
Wow.
But it's been so popular. But a friend of mine, Michael, was like, hey, do you want to direct this short? And I was like, why don't you get Ted to do it or somebody else? And he was like, well, introduce me to Ted because I want to work with him, but I'm going to give him a different one. And I still want you to do this. And he talked me into doing it. I'm so glad he did. And then he was like, oh, by the way, we're going to have to do this because we're in the height of COVID. We're going to have to do this via Zoom. I was like, wow, I have to direct my first short via Zoom. Okay. Then on top of it, he was like, oh, by the way, your actresses are deaf. So you're going to have to figure out how to communicate. So it was a challenge on top of a challenge, but I'm so glad that I didn't fight him and that I said yes and that I went for the challenge because it's won 2 awards, Best Director and Best COVID Film. So I'm amazed and grateful and excited about the whole thing.
So how do you direct 2 deaf actors via Zoom? How do you do that?
Yeah, it was interesting. It was you know, one of the actresses, first of all, the actresses they were never in the same room at the same time. So I had to figure out how I was going to film it to make it look like they were at the same place at the same time. And then one of the actresses' husband is deaf as well. So
Okay.
sometimes we would be rolling because he had to be the cameraman because
Oh,
you can't come to their house because we're in
right.
the middle of COVID, where we're at the height of COVID. Like vaccines hadn't even come out yet.
Oh,
You know
wow.
what I mean? So he had to be there, set up the camera, set up sound, and set up the lighting. And of course, we don't know if sound is working. He's got to set up everything. And then, I would do this and then cut. But sometimes if he wasn't looking, he couldn't hear me. So we would
Mhm.
be rolling, even though I wanted to stop. But you had to learn how to communicate. And then how do you express to another actor, I need something emotionally without being able to tell them what you want? So you
Right.
show them what you like. It's like, and then she's like, okay, okay. And then then she would do it and she nailed it. And then, but watching her watch herself on film was amazing, because she literally cried, because she was like, this is the best work at that time. It was the best work she felt like she had ever done. You know?
Wow. So now was her husband deaf as well, or?
Yeah, he was deaf. So that's why when we were shooting, sometimes I would want to stop, but we couldn't stop because he couldn't hear. So he could only watch like on the screen on Zoom when I would do this, but he would have to focus on the camera, so he
Right.
couldn't turn to do both at the same time. You know what I mean?
Okay. So, okay. Now you said you had to set up sound. And
He had to set up the sound.
so
Yeah.
you had to set up the sound. I don't even know how to pose this question. I guess, well,
Well, you have to have sound because you have to have the ambiance.
right. You have to have room ambient. Yeah.
Yeah, the room tone and all that kind of stuff. And then on top of it, there were times where she might have spoke, you know what I mean? Because she can speak as well.
Okay.
So there might have been times where we might have wanted that in the scene. But for the most part, I don't think we did. I think I might have. No, I don't think we did in this one. We did in another episode where she actually spoke. And so, but yes, you still needed sound as a safety precaution.
Okay. Okay. Now, I mean, a movie is a movie, regardless of if they're signing or they're actually speaking.
Mm-hmm.
But that's one of the reasons why it's so important that, as you said, people should learn every aspect of this business, because you never know when you may be on a set or faced with a situation such as that, and how do you handle that? So that was some wow. Wow. But you pulled it off because you have an award-winning film.
Yeah, it was amazing, and I am grateful for the experience. I hadn't felt that passion and joy since that same joy that I felt at that moment watching her watch the product and directing her. I haven't felt that joy and passion since the first time I started acting. Wow. It was that, oh my God, wow. You know, how I felt the first time I was on TV and all that, that's how it felt directing that particular actress.
So what's next?
I'm creating a social conscious show. It's going to bring people from, different parts together to have a conversation. That's next on my list. I'm creating a website to help actors with their acting. And I'm creating also kind of like a book for actors to be able to do like their, marketing checklist. So I'm creating those three things. Also producing a TV show that we're working on trying to get up and going. There's some people that are interested, a couple of networks. So we're just kind of seeing, what's going to happen.
Okay.
Always a lot of hurry up and wait. And then, of course, I'm doing all my voiceover and, all the other stuff, and traveling and taking care of myself. And like, here's my booth right here. You know what I mean?
Nice.
Yeah. So, like there's always something happening. I'm never sitting and not doing anything. I'm always doing something. So.
Well, that's awesome. And you know what, ladies and gentlemen, we have been chatting for so long that my daggone light turned off for me. It just was like, I'm tired, Floyd. It's time to go to bed. Yeah. But there are so many questions I did not even get to ask you. So you are definitely going to have to come back to the show, because there was so much I wanted to ask. But again, we can't be here all night because I know you're busy and you have things to do. I don't want to monopolize your time. Chrystee, this was awesome. It took some getting to get here. But I am so glad that we finally got it together and we made it work.
I know.
But again, if things don't go wrong in the business, it's not the business. So what are you going to do?
I know. This is why you got to, hurry up and wait and having patience. So I appreciate you having me on the show. I appreciate you being patient with all of the schedule changes. And so I just want to say thank you, and that I'm honored to be on your show.
Well, you know what? And back at you, because when your publicist reached out, because I got an email and she said, "Would you be interested in having such and such on the show?" I jumped up and ran in the other room and showed my wife the picture. I said, "Tracy," that's my wife's name. I was like, "Tracy," I said, "this publicist just emailed me, asked me could she be on my show." And she was like, "Well, who's she?" But she don't watch a lot of TV like that. And I'm cool. And I said, "This is who it is." She was like, "What? Really?" I was like, "Oh my gosh, she really come on my." So I'm fangirling, but that's okay.
That's okay.
So thank you for gracing our show with your presence, because again, you know what, you're phenomenal, and I don't just say that because you're on the show, but you are doing so much, the philanthropic work that you're doing, speaking to the young ladies in prison, and just doing so many other things, teaching people the real way to do this business, because it's so important that they do it the right way, and producing and directing, and just having yourself in so many different aspects of this business, because you have to be multidimensional to make it in this business, and you are such a phenomenal teacher. So where can everyone find you? Because I want everyone to be able to find you. Where can they find you? And if they want to sign up for your class, where can they sign up for your class?
Chrystee Pharris at Instagram, Facebook, and on the Instagram, there's an email. It's Ask Chrystee Pharris, I believe it is, at Gmail. You can go there and email me, and I will check the emails, and we'll see if we're a good fit, because it's a one-on-one situation. We want to make sure that we both vibe together, and I just want to make sure that you're in an area that I can actually do something for you. You know what I mean? I don't want to teach somebody and then we feel like it's not going to work, because you're not in the right area or whatever the case may be. So we would chat first. Okay.
Awesome. And all of these tidbits will be in the show notes. So if you say, "Well, I didn't hear what she said," when you scroll down, you'll be able to see everything that she just said and everywhere that she can be found. And if you can't find her there, then guess what? You can go on my Instagram, and we follow each other now, which I was like, "Oh, she following me. That's so nice."
Yeah.
But you can go and find her through me. So please don't make excuses as like you can't find her, because you need what she's putting down. But again, Chrystee, thank you so much. You're going to have to come back on the show, because we actually do a podcast called Building Tables, where we get together 2 to 3 phenomenal actresses, and they just talk about their journey in the business together. So I would love for you to come back and be a part of that when your busy schedule allows.
Absolutely. We'll make it work.
But ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining myself and the amazing Chrystee Pharris on a conversation with Floyd Marshall Jr. And I'll end it as I end every episode. Love this like a hobby, but treat it like a business. And on that note, everyone, have an absolutely phenomenal and amazing night.